Just a heads up for anybody who hasn't seen Agatha All Along yet, spoilers ahead. You've been warned. So I just got done watching Agatha All Along, and I'm feeling conflicted. On one hand, I felt some type of enjoyment while watching the show. This is true. But on the other hand, when I got to the end, I felt incredibly frustrated, mainly due to the fact that the show didn't even need to exist. I think one way to look at Agatha All Along is to look at it as a sequel to WandaVision, but also the type of spin-off show where instead of Wanda being the main character, we're now looking at Agatha. But like I said, this show didn't even need to be made. Now, before we get to the end and I rant about things I'm upset about with this show, I think it's important to go through the show itself. So we're going to go through the entire season of Agatha All Along. I just want to be very clear. I realize this show is not made for me, a straight white male, okay? I am aware of that. However, as a fan of the MCU and wanting to keep up with all the things that are going on in the universe, I felt it was important to maybe take a look at this show. So let's start with episode 1. Episode 1 has Agatha charading as a police officer in a very SVU Law and Order type vibe, which to anybody who's watched WandaVision knows this is mainly the same vibe that existed during the beginning of that show. Us as the audience, and having expected to have seen WandaVision, realize that Agatha must still be under some type of spell, because there's zero reason at all that she would randomly be a cop all of a sudden. So we see Agatha trying to solve a case that has zero bearing on any of the story that we're about to talk about. So I'm just going to skip it, because it has absolutely nothing to do with the story from here on out. If anything, episode 1 was a complete waste of time. Oh yeah, I guess she's under a spell. Let's spend the whole episode watching her under said spell just to be broken out of the spell towards the end of the episode by some random kid that shows up. I kid you not, I just summed up the entire first episode just like that. Why even make this an episode? If you wanted to make the first 10 minutes of the episode about her being under a spell, I can understand that, but they kept up the detective charade a little too long for my liking. The whole first episode seems like she's about to solve some major murder. And while yeah, it does create suspense, it leads to literally nothing. It just seems like a big waste of time to me. So just to keep it short and sweet, I'll sum up episode 1 like this. Agatha thinks she's a cop, turns out she's not a cop, and that she's actually Agatha. Surprise, I know.
Call me nosy, I'll cut out your tongue.
But the only reason she understands this is because some random kid shows up out of nowhere and says a spell which breaks the spell that she's under. I will say the fact that Agatha was still under the Westview spell while the rest of the Westview citizens weren't, and they were only entertaining her as a way to be kind, does make me laugh.
So what? I've just been spouting nonsense and you've just been humoring me?
Because after all, what are the Westview citizens gonna do? They don't know spells. They don't know how to break her out of the trance, so I guess the only thing you really can do is just kind of go along with it. Although you do get to see Catherine Hahn's butt, so I guess we didn't come out of this episode empty-handed. Then again, the only reason I feel like they showed her butt in the first place was to show that this show is going to be a mature theme. Once again, Agatha snaps out of her spell. She tries to use her powers and realizes that she cannot, thus setting up the whole point of this entire series, Agatha trying to regain her powers. At the very end of the episode, Rio, who we'll come to learn is actually Mistress Death, breaks through the door to come in and talk to Agatha. Okay, she actually comes to kill Agatha, but we notice some sort of sexual tension between the two.
You prefer me
horizontal?
Which, don't get me wrong, I totally understand it being Aubrey Plaza and everything, but it just doesn't make sense for the story. Now, I know some people are going to comment, yeah, but e.g., Mistress Death has a rich history of having romantic relationships with comic book characters in the Marvel Universe, so why doesn't this make sense for the story? And it's simply because I just don't think Agatha is the right fit to bring in a romantic relationship with Mistress Death. I almost feel like they kind of forced it just to have a popular character show up during the series. But if you remember correctly, they were originally going to use the court death theme in their first Avengers.
To challenge them is to court death.
And then I guess Disney just bailed on it. One of the many stories that they decided to bail on. In all honesty, it could be its own video. We'll get to that later. Rio says, "How long has it been, Agatha? You've been hiding behind all that dark magic." Suggesting that Agatha has been able to avoid death up until this point due to the magic that she's stolen over the centuries. If Mistress Death just killed Agatha right here, we wouldn't have needed the rest of these episodes. And it would literally change nothing, except for the explanation of one of the other characters. But had the show ended right here, we would have still gotten the same result at the end. Suggesting again just how meaningless the rest of this show is actually going to be. Mistress Death tells Agatha that she's going to tell the Salem 7 where to find Agatha.
But I'll be sure to tell them where to find find you.
Who, specifically?
The Salem 7.
who are probably the only interesting part of this whole entire series, yet also serve about as much purpose as Mrs. Hart does during this series, but we'll get to her in a minute. Let's get to episode 2. William, who we will come to learn is actually Billy Maximoff, Wanda's child. The same child that Wanda tore through the multiverse in Doctor Strange 2 on a murderous rampage trying to find her kids when they were literally in Westview the whole time. But it's not actually Billy. Billy managed to take over the body of somebody else before their body was too far gone to be hijacked. That's right, they died, and then Billy Maximoff just inserted himself into the body of this freshly dead young kid. I guess that's the only way I can really explain it. Billy tells Agatha to take him to the Witch's Road. Agatha tells Billy that the Witch's Road doesn't exist, which it technically doesn't, because we'll come to find out that Agatha was the one who created the whole entire story about the Witch's Road from the beginning.
The Witch's Road doesn't exist.
You're lying.
Am I?
So she was actually being honest with Billy here. Here's another thing. You're going to see Agatha tell all the other witches that she's walked the road, yet tells Billy right here and now that the road doesn't exist. Then Billy somehow manages to forget that Agatha said the road doesn't exist, but then somehow manages to believe her when she says she's walked it. I swear, Disney writers pay no attention to any other show or movie that is in the entire universe of the MCU. There's no way they can, because they miss so much. And I know as a writer, it's probably impossible to keep up with everything that goes on, but sometimes just take a step back and think about what you're writing and see if it makes sense. You would probably save yourself a lot of headache and a lot of criticisms from people online. Agatha all of a sudden switches up on Billy and says,
Road is no place for a kid.
Billy says, I'll make it through the road, I guarantee it, which Agatha replies,
But it will kill you.
because Agatha knows that it kills everybody because she's the road. And Billy says, well, the road didn't kill you. Then Agatha says,
Well, I'm exceptional.
we'll realize later that Agatha was actually killing all the witches who were trying to seek out the road. It was her way to steal power from other witches. So the road technically doesn't exist, and that's where Billy comes in. See, Billy, being the son of the Scarlet Witch, Wanda Maximoff, has the ability to reshape reality, just like his mother. So the only reason that they even end up on the road in the first place is because Billy creates the whole damn thing in his mind, which makes it a reality. So Agatha at this point, playing along with Billy, says, well, we're going to need a coven. The only reason Agatha is even interested in this Witch's Road journey in the first place is because she's going to try to steal the power from the other witches that she finds to trick into coming in order to regain her power. The one thing I will say that's consistent about this show is that Agatha is by far the most selfish character at all times. She never really intended on being anything other than what she's always been, and that is wicked, a wicked witch. You see what I did there? So Agatha takes Billy to the closest witch that they can find, which just so happens to be a fortune teller who we will come to find out later put a sigil on Billy that prevents his name from being said. Yet even though she claims the sigil is so other witches won't try to harm him, it's really just so the audience doesn't learn who Billy is right away. Because had we learned about who Billy was in the beginning of this season, we'd most likely stop watching because we would know that the Witch's Road is a figment of Billy's imagination. Well, I don't know that for sure, but I know that I would have stopped because I would have been able to put the pieces together. Mainly because at that point, I would be like, wake me up when they're outside of the road because the road is clearly not real. None of this means anything, really, aside from the deaths that take place there. So anyway, they recruit the fortune teller to be part of their coven, aka someone that Agatha is planning on stealing power from. She then recruits Jen, who's probably the only hero of this whole entire story, and she's a witch that cares about cosmetology. They also recruit Alice, who's a protection witch, and whose mom apparently was a huge rock star. They also recruit Mrs. Hart, who supposedly is a green witch, but in reality, she's no witch at all. She's just some regular lady from Westview who, in my opinion, got the biggest shit end of the stick throughout this whole entire show. They end up singing the Witch's Road song, which is supposed to be used to summon the road, even though it's just a song that Agatha created with her son back during the olden days, which is how the song became so popular. You see, because Agatha has lived so long that she was literally the one who created witch culture. But the one thing I don't get here is they never really explain how witches even get their powers in the first place. So there's just these random women walking around performing witchcraft. I wanted to dive a little deeper into this question, so I did a quick Google search, and it turns out that in the book Agatha All Along, it says that witches get their power by joining joining Agatha and being killed by her to absorb their powers. So I guess Agatha teaches them how to use their powers only to steal their powers to increase her own lifespan. It also turns out that Agatha's mother was a witch, which is probably how Agatha was able to get her powers in the first place. This goes all the way back to the Salem days. If you remember correctly, she did try to steal Wanda's power, but wasn't able to because the Scarlet Witch was just too powerful with her chaos magic. Wanda was also able to use runes in Westview to deny Agatha her power during their final fight at the end of the season finale of WandaVision. In conclusion, basically magic makes no sense and can be used any way they want in the MCU because after all, it's friggin' magic. There really is no rhyme or reason to it. You either have magic or you don't, I guess.
You sure about that?
So anyway, back to the plot. Much to everybody's surprise, including Agatha, a door to the Witch's Road appears in the floor as the Salem 7 are quickly approaching Agatha. You can clearly see that Agatha is just as shocked as anybody else that an actual door appeared, so the witches run down the steps to try to get away from the Salem 7, who want to kill Agatha for what she did to their parent. This door was only created because of Billy Maximoff wanting it to be there. Before this moment, no witches walked the road. It didn't exist. The only reason there is a Witch's Road in the first place is because Billy created it all in his mind. Remember, he is the son of the Scarlet Witch, therefore he has the power to create realities, in this case, the reality being the Witch's Road. Let's move on to episode 3 now. Agatha and her coven have finally arrived at the Witch's Road, the first time any witch has ever actually walked the road and not been victimized by Agatha. But the only people who know this at the time is Agatha. Billy doesn't realize that he's created this road either, and all the other witches believe that this is actually the road that they've heard and sang about so much. The only reason the witches know what to do is because the song that Agatha created so many years ago, which in all honesty was just her making up things along the way. But since Billy knows the song so well, he knows the rules of the road, and he created it to follow directly along with the song that Agatha created. So the witches get to their first trial, which is a trial about potions. So everybody's required to drink a glass of wine that turns out to have poison in it, causing their faces to blow up. Not literally blow up, but like in flame. It's up to Jen, who's the potion witch, to figure out a cure before time runs out. Of course, she does, and everybody drinks their potion before time runs out for them to escape through an oven. However, it turns out that Mrs. Hart, who wasn't a witch at all, just a crazy lady who happens to enjoy wine, had one too many glasses of wine and it ended up causing her to die.
I have had a very hard day. Do not judge me.
Episode 4. So the witches say, we need to restore our covenant and add a green witch. And out of nowhere, Aubrey Plaza comes crawling out of the ground like some kind of demented zombie.
It's about to be cast! Why is the pit so small?
Heard you guys were having a party.
And claims that the only reason she was chosen to be a part of their coven was because you know how magic works. It finds the fastest, most convenient person and then brings them to the present. When in reality, we know that it was because Billy probably brought her there since, you know, Death was lurking around and stalking Agatha. He just happened to grab her out of convenience and bring her into the road, but since Rio, who is actually Mistress Death, can come and go as she pleases and manipulate Billy's false reality any way she wants because she's friggin' Death,
Less a green witch, more the green witch.
she doesn't have to play by Billy's rules, so she just kind of enjoys the ride while she's there. The witches, having made it through their first trial, all except poor Mrs. Hart, who again just got wrapped up into this whole thing out of convenience for Agatha, prepare for their next trial. This trial is a musical trial where the witches are forced to sing the most popular version of the Witch's Road ballad that just so happened to be the ballad that Alice's mom created. The whole time they're doing this, they're being stalked by some type of crazy thing.
I can see it!
During the performance, Billy Maximoff is struck in the abdomen by some type of foreign object. In a way, Billy kind of stabbed himself, considering that he's the person who created this whole entire reality in the first place. At this point, Billy's supposed to know who he is according to later episodes, so he could have probably just fixed himself, yet he somehow requires Jen to fix him, which she does. Jen's not a mean witch, she's actually a pretty good witch. The coven ends up doing the song the way it's supposed to and escapes the trial. But they put a lot of pressure on Jen, I gotta be honest here. And that's episode 4. On to episode 5. We get a flashback to the end of WandaVision that shows the Salem 7 and Agatha originally learning about her ability to steal powers from other witches. To be honest, I don't even know why they bring up the Salem 7 because they serve zero purpose in this whole entire season. They might as well not even have been there. If anything, they're only used to add pressure on the witches to move forward more quickly and for cheap suspense. But had the Salem 7 not been there, I don't think it would have affected the story whatsoever. They probably would have just felt like they didn't need to go through the road so quickly. Rio, aka Death, tells Agatha that Billy is not her son.
My boy isn't yours.
Because up until this point, the plot flirts with the idea that Agatha is starting to begin to wonder if Billy Maximoff is her son Nicholas, reincarnated. Which gets spoiled now because we know that he's Wanda's son. But again, during your first viewing of this, you're supposed to believe that Billy could potentially be Agatha's son. That's kind of what the story leans towards. Even though Agatha says at one point to Billy that she knew all along that he was Billy Maximoff. Again, these are just massive plot holes that I think take place for no other reason than to create curiosity and suspense for the audience, because either Agatha knew or she didn't know. There are random spurts of humanity that take place within Agatha.
Don't.
Because she thinks that Billy is her son Nicholas. To be fair though, Agatha could have realized after Death told her that Billy wasn't her son, that she realized that it was one of Wanda's kids. Episode 5 is where things start to play out in more detail that actually matters. So from here on out, I'll try to be a little more detailed about what takes place, because now the things that happened affect the story a bit more. As where before, the trials had nothing to do with anything. It was just kind of lip service for entertaining the audience.
What happens next?
But now we're actually getting to the parts of the story that matter. It opens up with the Salem 7 hot on the trail of Agatha and her coven. Again, the 7 only being used as a way to push the story forward faster so that the witches don't spend too much time dilly-dallying on Witches Road. They end up using random pieces of wood that they pull out of the side of the road as brooms and fly, which makes you wonder, why haven't they been doing this the whole time? I mean, this seems like the fastest way to get around the Witches Road, let alone the world. Then, when asked why they don't use brooms more often, the fortune teller says,
brooms have been co-opted by the holiday industrial complex as an absurd emblem of our culture. Worse yet, they're an obvious symbol of female domesticity.
oh, and Jen adds,
They're basic.
which is probably one of the cringiest moments of this whole entire show. So you're telling me you can fly, but because it's tacky, you don't do it. Let me just go get stuck in traffic instead.
I don't even think you really know what a bad day is.
I'm sorry, but if I had a broom and I could fly around on it like Harry Potter, I'd be flying that bitch everywhere. I feel like this is by far the worst excuse you could have given the witches not to ride brooms. It makes zero sense. But I guess the writers needed some strange reason why the witches don't use brooms more often. I'm starting to see why people can't stand the Disney writers anymore. If this is the best that they can come up with to explain why the broom riding isn't something that witches do more often in the MCU, they couldn't have written something better, like it's because it drains their power, or because we can only do it for so long before we get tired, it ages us too fast, or some ridiculous thing like that. No, it's because they're basic. And not that it has something to do with corporate America and commercial imaging of witches that you're rebelling against so you don't fly or use the most convenient mode of transportation. What an absolute joke. So they end up getting the brooms up in the air just in time to escape the Salem 7. Again, just a way to build cheap suspense for this silly show. The Coven arrive at their next trial, which gives off a horror type vibe from the 80s. Very Friday the 13th feeling. And they find a Ouija board. Actually, the Ouija board just falls out of the shelf, kind of hinting to them that they need to use it. They use the Ouija board as instructed, and by that I mean Billy literally reads the instructions that came with the board, even adding that
That's Sailor back there.
For ages 3 and up.
at first it seems like they've contacted Mrs. Hart, but it turns out that Agatha's just playing a trick on everybody.
On my own early demise.
She's Agatha.
You see, because at this point, Agatha must know that they're just in some kind of weird reality, so she's not taking it very seriously. And she does it also for no other reason than to be a dick.
I'm such a dick.
So they ask another question about who the person is, and the answer is, of course, Death. Which makes sense, considering that Death herself is sitting there playing this game with them, which is why she laughs maniacally.
We're not supposed to ask about that.
But at this point, the only people who know who she actually is Agatha and Rio herself. They then ask, what do you want with her? And they say punish. And then who? Agatha's the answer. Clearly, Rio is just having fun with the Ouija board since she's Mistress Death and she wants to kill Agatha. Now, the one thing I'll give this show is that watching it the second time through feels like a completely different experience than watching it the first time. And I think Disney did that on purpose so that people would watch it twice, knowing what they know the first time and seeing all the signs. Much like the Sixth makes sense. It's kind of somewhat fun to go back and see all the hints they gave you to let you know who each person was before they actually came out as that particular person. But I don't know about you. I don't feel like investing that much time into watching most shows a second time through, unless it's something great like Game of Thrones. And then you add in that this show probably didn't even need to be made, and it hardly affects the MCU overall, and that just adds more reason why not to watch it a second time. Agatha turns into some kind of evil, dead-looking creature, then magically changes back to Agatha the minute the lights come on. The ghost of Agatha's mother appears, and it's revealed that the reason that Agatha looked that way was because her mother possessed her for a few moments.
It was nice having you in my body for a second there.
Agatha's mother is probably the only person who actually tries to help the Coven here by telling them that her Coven risked everything to try to stop Agatha and that these foolish witches willingly joined her.
My Coven risked everything to kill her, and you fools have willingly joined her.
And while at first glance it may appear that Agatha's mother's evil, you realize that she was actually trying to save the witches from Agatha herself. I don't know why she wouldn't just be transparent and tell her exactly what Agatha's plans were, but had they only listened to her, maybe Alice would still be alive, because she ends up trying to protect Agatha using her powers, only to have Agatha drain Alice of her powers, which is what Agatha set out to do this whole entire time. Agatha's mother says, "Leave Agatha with me, complete the witch's road without her," to which Death says, "No, Agatha's mother cannot have her, and that's only because Mistress Death wants her for herself." None of this makes sense the first time you watch it, but the second time going through all this stuff makes complete sense. Unless you're very keen-eyed and you knew it all along. I guess the first watch is all you really need. At least I was thinking the first time that it makes zero sense. Like, why would Death want Agatha away from her mother, knowing that she wants Agatha to suffer? But once you find out that Rio's actually Mistress Death, it makes a lot more sense. She doesn't want to be denied Agatha's body. Because you realize that Rio only wants her because she wants to kill her herself, and then take Agatha's soul into the next life, or whatever death does after you die. Whereas Agatha's mother doesn't want her to continue the witch's road because she knows that she's going to end up killing the witches that she's with. So again, the only person here doing the right thing was Agatha's mom, who is being presented like some type of evil being. Agatha puts on an act, or at least what I can only assume is an act, by asking her mom, "Why do you still hate me?"
Why do you hate me still?
To which the mother says,
You were born evil. I ought to have killed you the moment you left my body.
which, ouch, that's pretty intense. But it makes sense considering we all know that Agatha is only here to steal power from witches that she brought along on this journey. And in stealing the powers, she actually ends up killing them. Jen, having a moment of clarity, realizes that this trial is the only trial where there's no flood. There's no fire forcing them to leave. And that the only danger in this trial is Agatha herself. Jen pretty much is the only perceptive one of the whole group thus far, probably because she got that black girl magic, you know what I'm saying? Agatha's mother takes over and possesses Agatha's body again, causing Alice to jump up and try to save Agatha by blasting her with witch's power, I guess. And of course, Agatha being a trash human, she steals all of Alice's power, killing Alice. If only Alice had listened to the warning that Agatha's mother gave her like 2 seconds before this, Alice would still be alive. Another thing that really frustrates me about this part is that Alice knew that Agatha wanted to steal their powers because it was made very clear at the door when it appeared. Agatha was trying to get them to blast her with their power so that she could steal it.
Wait! Huh? This is a power grab. She wants us to attack her. You brought us here hoping our proximity, coupled with your cruelty, would get you a spark you could steal. You had no intention of bringing us on the road. I don't have time for this! Just blast me, you bitches!
This is usually where the witch's road ends for most witches, but the minute Agatha starts calling them all idiots so that they'll blast her in a fit of rage, like a bunch of emotional women, making it easy for Agatha to just steal their power somehow, they were smart enough then to realize that she was trying to steal their power, but all of a sudden just act like that never even happened. They know that the whole point of this thing is for Agatha to get their power. Yet Alice hops up and's like, YOLO, and then blasts Agatha and then ends up dying because of it. So now Billy's all pissed off at Agatha because Agatha killed Alice, even though Billy should have probably known this from the very beginning, but he keeps having this weird idea that Agatha is a good person deep down, instead of seeing her for the absolute selfish woman that she actually is. This wraps up episode 5. Now, on to episode 6. In episode 6, we finally get to learn about Billy Maximoff, aka William, aka the Jewish kid. And you see how Billy was before he became Billy Maximoff. He managed to engage with all the witches as William, who's the guy he was before he became Billy Maximoff. It's very confusing. But then dies in a car crash, leaving Billy to take his life, and then turning himself into Billy Maximoff. Ralph Boner, not Quicksilver, Ralph Boner again, meet up with Billy in the parking garage. Yet again, just rubbing it in our faces how stupid we are as an audience to like Marvel and to expect them to embrace Evan Peters as Quicksilver in the MCU, only to make him some weirdo again. They play him off as some type of idiot. In fact, I don't even want to talk about it anymore because it just makes me upset. Disney, you missed such a huge opportunity with this character, just to flex on your audience. It's a damn disgrace. Hopefully now that Disney seems to somewhat be listening to us as an audience, they course correct and hopefully will manage to turn Ralph Boner into the speedster-like character, and then it turns out that Ralph Boner was actually the fake part of his persona. But I'm not holding my breath on that one. And that's really all this episode is. It was meant to be like a huge reveal, and I guess in a way it kinda is. It was kinda like, well, I guess that's somewhat neat. But at the same time, it comes off like really flat. Oh, Billy Maximoff, who saw that coming?
I'm Billy Maximoff.
All of a sudden, Billy becomes like super powerful out of nowhere and then forces the witches below the witches' road somehow by sending them through like some type of quicksand looking swamp thing. So now we have two groups of witches, Jen and the fortune teller, and Agatha and Billy. There's only 4 people left. Rio's disappeared, but we know why, because she's deaf and she could just do her own thing. And that's pretty much episode 6. Not really a whole lot there. It's amazing they were even able to somehow manage to turn this into like a 20-something minute long episode. Episode 7 starts off with Agatha looking like the Wicked Witch and Billy looking like Maleficent from Snow White. You know that Disney's not going to miss out on an opportunity to flex characters from their other franchises. This episode really frustrates me, and I know like the whole show does, but particularly this episode. I wasn't sure if it has to do with the budget or not, but there could have been like an epic battle between the Salem witches and Agatha and her coven. Instead, it ends with the fortune teller all of a sudden turning into a girl boss and killing the entire Salem 7 in one fell swoop. Is it too much to ask for like a little bit of action? The Salem 7 has been on their ass the whole entire time, just to be eliminated in 2 seconds by the room flipping upside down. It's incredibly frustrating that for 7 episodes, we're built to fear these Salem 7 as like these imposing figures just for them to be killed so quickly and in such a unclimactic way. I remember when I first watched this, I was thinking there's no way they're dead. They gotta come back. All that build up for them to just die by flipping the room upside down? Very lazy writing. Part of me wonders if budget cuts led to that decision and they couldn't afford to have the Salem 7 fight the coven. But anyway, this episode leads to the death of the fortune teller witch. She goes out like a beast by killing the Salem 7 before she inevitably dies, sacrificing herself for the greater good of the coven, which at the end of the day means absolutely nothing. So she sacrificed herself for literally nothing. Maybe for Billy, I guess, in a way. This episode makes me more mad than anything because of everything I've said before this. I feel like it was such a big missed opportunity to really show off what witches can do in a battle. But instead, it just shows the power of being able to read tarot cards or something ridiculous like that. Episode 8, by all accounts, should have been the final episode of this season because it really feels that way. The witches end up right back where they started at the beginning of the Witches' Road, where Agatha can no longer pretend like she's been here before and starts asking questions like, how do we get the hell out of here?
How exactly do we get off?
But now that Billy Maximoff knows who he is, even though he technically did this whole time, magically realizes that if you put on your shoes, you finish the road. They wake up in some weird morgue-like room. Jen realizes that Agatha's the reason she lost her powers all of a sudden, and then has this black girl moment where she's like, this white bitch don't got no power over me.
You hold nothing. You hold nothing.
And then Jen magically gets her power back, which evicts her from the road since she got what she achieved from the road, which is the rules that Billy set up for this reality beforehand. Jen is the only witch from this show who somehow managed to turn this journey into a positive for herself. Everybody else either died or have pretty much achieved nothing from this journey. And she's the only witch from the coven to make it out alive, other than Death, who's clearly Death and is more powerful than anybody else in this whole entire show. Agatha then teaches Billy Maximoff how to use his power of telekinesis to find his brother Tommy, and he ends up finding a kid drowning, waits for the kid to die, and then shoves his brother Tommy into the kid who just died. Again, kind of hard to really explain how this all works, but just know magic. Really, it seems like they were created by their mother and they didn't actually have like a physical body. As long as they jump into someone who died recently enough, they can just go on living as them, which kind of creepy in theory. Once Billy finds Tommy and puts him in the same poor kid's body who just died, Billy disappears next from the room, leaving Agatha there all alone. Oh look, now it's Agatha all alone. That was a bad joke. I'll shut up now. Agatha realizes the trial's a growing plants trial, so she finds a tiny weed seed in a locket where she keeps her son's hair and quickly plants it in the crack that Billy made when putting Tommy into some poor dead kid's body. And then she busts out of the basement of the house that they entered the road in. Now, the one thing I forgot to mention here was that Agatha made a deal with Death, who is upset that Billy took the body of a kid that was meant to die, thus denying Death, and is now living as him, and wants Billy to turn himself in since she can't physically kill him herself. Agatha agrees and says that I will hand him over as long as you let me live a long, long life. Death agrees, but then Death says, if you don't give me Billy, then I'm gonna take you as recompense. This sets up the final battle. We finally get to learn that Rio is Mistress Death, and she tells Agatha, I don't have Billy, so I'm gonna have to take you as recompense for not giving me Billy. Agatha screams about how she didn't get her prize or some shit like that. Death says, I want my prize too, her prize being Agatha. There's a random battle here between non-powered up Agatha and Death, and I gotta say that I hope on my deathbed, Aubrey Plaza is the one that comes for me as well. Because damn, she looks good here. Yes, I simp for Aubrey Plaza, guys. It's my curse, my burden to bear. And then just when it seems like it's all said and done, out of nowhere, here comes Billy Maximoff, dressed in his comic-accurate character, just a very gay version of him. No, I mean that Billy is gay. I don't mean like he's gay looking, I just mean like Billy's actually gay. Billy, then being a complete and total gullible nerd, shares his power with Agatha, who for the first time in the whole show does the right thing and doesn't suck Billy dry. No pun intended. Or maybe a little pun intended. Now Agatha, being full-powered, begins to fight Death with Billy at her side, albeit Billy not nearly as powerful as he was because he just shared half his power with Agatha. Agatha realizes that you can't fight Death because, let's be realistic, nobody can beat Death. I mean, Death friggin' comes for us all. Eventually, Agatha sacrifices herself for Billy, doing a very Star Wars-esque last-minute turnaround, but, you know, I guess Disney gonna Disney, am I right? After all these years, Death finally gets Agatha when she sacrifices herself for Billy, which obviously Death is very happy about, only for us to realize that Agatha has unfinished business and is now a ghost. There is a random episode after this where it breaks down how Agatha created the whole entire Witch's Road thing as a con to steal other witches' power, but I don't really feel like I need to break that down. It does set up a lot of backstory between Death and Agatha and explains why Agatha hates Death, because Death came for Agatha's son when she least expected it and didn't even give her a chance to say goodbye, because Death did tell Agatha when Nicholas was born that she would be coming for him before her. And then the series ends with Agatha and Billy deciding to go and try and find Tommy. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was Agatha All Along. With a show titled Agatha All Along, it's not shocking to realize that Agatha was behind the Witch's Road the whole time, and that the only person who made it out unscathed besides Billy and Agatha was the cosmetologist Jen. So while the series isn't the worst series in Marvel, it's certainly not the best either. It seems like it was made for the Halloween season and as a way to set up side characters to be used in future shows or movies. But as a comic book fan, I don't really care too much about Billy or Tommy Maximoff. They're not characters that I'm super excited for. They'll probably be used in Young Avengers. And also, I don't really care that Billy Maximoff is gay either. It doesn't really bother me. I'm sure it bothers some people out there, but let's just be realistic. Some people are actually gay. But I mean, going back to what I said in the beginning of this series, I don't feel like this show even needed to be made. It affects nothing in the grand scheme of things. Because after that entire journey on the Witch's Road, it didn't really affect anything. All it did was kill off a couple of witches, and the whole thing being created by Billy Maximoff means that the Witch's Road itself never actually existed either. And I refuse to believe that they put the sigil on him for any other reason than so that the audience couldn't know who Billy Maximoff was, not because of the witches. I really don't see how a witch would give a crap who Billy Maximoff was or who he wasn't. It was just a way to build up that Billy Maximoff was William the whole entire time. Another thing that I don't think these writers understand is that now that Billy has come forward, it completely destroys the reason the Scarlet Witch was tearing through the multiverse in Doctor Strange 2 trying to find her kids, when she didn't even need to leave the town that she was originally in to find them. It just comes off as lazy to me. I hope going forward though that Marvel forces the writers to watch the other movies where higher stakes events take place and tells the writers for new shows and new movies not to destroy those important events that fans have come to love, because it happens all the time. In Loki season 1, they turned the Infinity Stones into paperweights. In Secret War, they made Rhodey a scroll throughout the entire Thanos saga. saga. It makes no sense, and I don't know why Disney doesn't try harder to force the writers to be updated on the importance of the continuity, and why they're so okay with writers just completely crapping on important moments that fans recognize as important. I almost feel like for a while, Disney thought that they could do whatever they wanted and people would still come and watch these movies, but I'm hoping now that Jonathan Majors being canceled and them redoing the main storyline from Kang to Doctor Doom, that Marvel's going to do what they should have done a while ago, and that's get back to making good movies where the connections between the movies are important and are considered sacred and are treated with kid gloves, so that you're not destroying the thing that made the MCU so great in the first place, which was all the things being connected and intertwined with one another. With that said, I hope that you guys have enjoyed this recap of Agatha All Along. An enjoyable experience for the most part, and the fact that you could watch it twice and see almost two completely different shows I found to be very interesting. But I don't think that people are going to look back at like Agatha All Along and think, wow, this was a real turning point for the MCU. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed this, and I look forward to seeing you guys on the next one. Peace.